The movie opens with pilot Sully sending out a distress signal as two of the plane's engines fail, leading to a potential crash. Co-pilot Jeff informs him that they are at a dangerously low altitude, and the plane descends towards New York City. Sully desperately attempts to avoid crashing into a building. Passengers aboard the plane are in a state of panic as the wing of the plane ultimately collides with a building. Sully expresses his love and gratitude to Jeff before the plane crashes and explodes in the city. However, it's revealed that this was all a nightmare, and Sully wakes up horrified and gasping for air. News outlets report on the successful landing of an American Airlines plane on the Hudson River, with pilot Sully credited for saving the lives of all 155 passengers on board. The event is described as a miracle. Sully and Jeff are subsequently interviewed by a team investigating the incident, with one member, Charles, recording the meeting on a cassette tape. During the interview, Sully corrects Charles's characterization of the event as an accident, emphasizing that it was an emergency landing and that he and Jeff were fully aware of their actions. The investigation centers on the question of why Sully chose to land on the Hudson River instead of returning to LaGuardia Airport. Sully explains that due to the plane's altitude at the time of the incident, they were unable to safely descend to the airport. When questioned on how he was able to make such quick decisions, Sully responds that he didn't rely on calculations, but rather on his vast experience from flying thousands of flights. An investigator claims that the left engine of the plane was running slowly but still functioning, but Sully disagrees and maintains that both engines had malfunctioned. In a taxi ride, Jeff and a colleague discuss how some individuals may attempt to tarnish Sully's reputation, but most people speak highly of him and view him as a hero. Even the taxi driver praises his actions. Sully contacts his wife, Lori, who is at home with their two daughters. Lori expresses her anxiety and stress over the journalists who have gathered outside their house seeking an interview with her husband. As Sully exits the taxi to check into a hotel, he is met by a throng of journalists who bombard him with questions such as, "How does it feel to have performed the impossible?" Sully calls Lori again, and she remains worried about him as well as the intense attention and investigations he is currently facing. Sully also reaches out to Jeff, who is also feeling stressed and worried, and the two decide to go for a walk together as a means of coping with the situation. Jeff brings up the upcoming media interview they have scheduled for the following day. And Sully expresses frustration that after 42 years in his profession, he's being judged based on 208 seconds. Jeff reassures him that the computer simulator will show that his decision was correct and that they can return to their normal lives after this. On the second day, Sully gives an interview to announcer Kitty, who asks about his thoughts on being hailed as a national hero. Sully insists that he is not a hero and that he was simply doing his job. After the interview, Sully glances out the window and experiences a hallucination of another plane crashing in the city. Sully and Jeff meet with the investigators again. Charles says that one of the engines was running at a slower speed and that tests done on the flight simulator showed that the pilot could have gone back to LaGuardia Airport. Sully disputes the investigators' assertion and maintains that he felt the engines had failed, with Jeff backing up his claim. The investigators question the lack of evidence, as the engine sank in the river after the landing. Charles accuses Sully of endangering the lives of passengers and causing damage to American Airlines' reputation. Later, while at the hotel, Sully speaks with Lori on the phone and expresses concern over their financial situation. Lori urges him to return to work as soon as possible, with both of them feeling stressed and anxious. Sully expresses his fear that the investigators may be correct and that his decision was a mistake. He worries that the worst-case scenario would be losing his job without a pension and ending his career. Lori becomes even more worried and concerned upon hearing this. Sully tells her about the meeting with the investigators, and she questions why he made the decision to land on the water. On January 15, 2009, the day of the incident, Sully and Jeff carried out their usual checks before takeoff. 2 minutes into the flight, a flock of birds flew in the opposite direction of the plane and collided with both engines, causing them to fail and stop working. Jeff notices that the engines have failed and the passengers are becoming increasingly panicked. Sully contacts the airline control center and is informed that they are making efforts to clear the runway for the plane to land. Realizing that they won't make it to the runway, Sully decides to land on the river. He informs the passengers to prepare for impact, and the flight attendant instructs them to lower their heads. Sully informs the control center of his plan to land on the river, and the plane disappears from the control center's radar. Sully and Jeff then proceed to descend and land on the river. Currently, Sully ends his call with Lori and goes for a jog in the city. When he sees jet aircraft carriers, he is reminded of his previous experiences flying jets. He recalls a specific instance where he safely landed a jet, and his colleague congratulated him and praised his flying skills. He realizes that the plane on the aircraft carrier is the same one he had flown on that particular occasion. Sully goes to a bar, where the worker recognizes him and offers him a drink named in his honor. Customers greet him, calling him a hero. He watches the news, which is airing a story about the incident. Sully reflects on the day of the event, when the passengers were terrified as the plane began to land on a river. As water starts to fill the cabin, Sully exits the cockpit and instructs the passengers to quickly evacuate the plane through the inflated rubber lifeboats. The passengers put on life jackets and stood on the wings of the plane, waiting for rescue in the cold weather. A ship arrives at the scene and rescues the passengers on the right wing of the plane. Another boat arrives and assists the passengers on the left wing. A police helicopter arrives, and rescuers jump into the water to help those who are floating. After Sully checks the plane, he is the last one to leave. All passengers, crew, and pilots are safely rescued and given blankets to cover themselves from the cold. Sully calls Lori to assure her of his safety, though she is unaware of the incident until he advises her to watch the news with their daughters. On the dock, Sully inquires about the number of rescued passengers, which is reported to be 155 people, including the crew. He remains worried. He then goes to the hospital and is informed by his manager, Arnie, that all 155 people on the plane have been rescued. This brings him comfort, and he goes to a hotel, where he is greeted warmly by one of the staff members. We return to the present, where the TV in the bar is airing a report stating that the timing of the ship's arrival at the plane was ideal and that the pilot and police are to be commended. An idea comes to Sully, and he contacts one of the investigators named Larry, asking for a favor. He wants to re-simulate the plane incident himself before the trial, feeling that a human's involvement will yield different results than a computer simulation. If the results are similar to the computer simulation, Sully plans to retire. He explains that the issue is all about timing, and anyone can complete a task if they're not in a hurry. Larry agrees and offers to help. Before the trial, Lori calls Sully while she is crying, as the incident has been very traumatic for her. After the call, Sully attempts to calm down and enters the courtroom, where he takes his seat. Charles begins the trial. Sully's request to simulate the incident using the same weather, altitude, and speed as the day of the crash is granted. During the simulation, the pilots fly the simulated plane towards the airport runway immediately after the bird strike incident and safely land. They also conducted another simulation with a different scenario at a different airport, with the same successful outcome. Charles asks Sully what he wanted to prove by using human simulation, and Sully asks him to take the matter seriously. Sully explains that the simulation was done without taking into account the human factor, the lives of the passengers, and that none of the pilots who conducted the simulation were under the same psychological pressure as Sully and Jeff were. He also points out that no one warned them that they would lose the engines when they were at a low altitude, like any plane. He states that the pilots were instructed to go to the airport after the bird incident without taking into account the time for analysis or decision-making. Sully asks how many attempts were made based on the simulation, and the flight engineer responds that the pilot who landed at the second airport made 17 attempts to land until he was sure he was descending correctly. Charles agrees to set the decision time back to 35 seconds and has the pilots repeat the simulation, but this time the plane crashes in the simulation. After the audience sees the potential outcome, Jeff suggests they hear what actually happened. The audience listens to the audio recording of the cockpit conversation for the first time. After listening to the recording, Sully and Jeff leave the room. Sully expresses his pride in what he did and acknowledges Jeff's effort in saving the lives of 155 people. They return to the courtroom. The engineer reports that the left engine was retrieved from the river and was found to be completely destroyed, as Sully had stated. The recording is deemed sufficient evidence to prove that Sully and Jeff made the correct decision. After consulting with flight experts, the engineer states that the incident could have been a disaster had Sully not been present. However, Sully maintains that Jeff and the flight attendants also deserve credit and that the credit is not solely for him. He also acknowledges the rescue agents, who performed perfectly to save the situation and knew how to act and keep the passengers safe. This movie is based on a true story, and it took 24 minutes for rescue agents to rescue the passengers. Thank you for watching this video. We hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more videos like this one.